how do you answer their questions? And
your
questions?
job as a parent, and I think just as much as a grandparent, is to interpret the world to your child and interpret your child to the world.
Okay.
Day after day, your child is going to come back from their day experience, or your grandchild is going to come back from their experience of the world, maybe at nursery, kindergarten, or school, or high school, and things are going to have happened to them. They're going to encounter life in all its difficulties, in all its challenges, in all its oddities, in all its sin, and they're going to encounter that, the full force of that, without having the maturity, experience, strength of adulthood to answer those things. And one of the ways that we pass on a culture is through questions. And the secret of questions is, number one, don't see questions as a challenge, see them as an opportunity. So many parents feel that when their children ask questions, they're being questioning. And there's a big difference between asking a question and being questioning. And parents confuse those two, and grandparents can do the same. I've got to shut that down. Well, that's a terrible question. That's embarrassing. We can't talk about that here. Questions are there to be wrestled with. And a powerful question is often more powerful than a powerful answer. And you pass on a culture, and one of the ways you do that is through questions. And what I mean by that is you allow the question to come out, you reshape the question so it's the right question, and then you don't answer it.
You might say, well, what do you think?
Exactly.
You're trying to draw.
What are you hearing from your peers? What are they saying about it? What do you think about what they say? How does that make you feel inside? Do you feel comfortable with their answer? What do you think the Bible says? What have you read? And all the time you're trying to draw out of them their own way of answering the question. And here's something about questions. The fact that you don't know the answer now does not mean there isn't an answer. It just means you don't know it now.
What if you don't know the answer to the question?
It doesn't matter.
You don't have an answer.
You're not afraid of questions. That's the number one thing.
Okay.
And the world throws questions at us all the time, particularly about our manner of life, because we want to stick to a biblical, fundamental lifestyle. And we will get attacked on that all the time. And there'll be multiple questions. So we needn't be afraid of the questions. We will be questioned all the time. And the Bible talks about always being ready to give an answer for the faith that's in you. Now, sometimes you don't know the answer to the question. Somebody bigger, more intelligent, that knows more about this or that is going to ask you a question and you don't know the answer.
So what do you say to the grandchild?
It doesn't make you wrong. Well, I think you can say, do you know what? We're on a journey. We're finding that one out. I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. I don't know. Why don't we find out together? Why don't we get a book and read it together and find out together? Let's go on this journey together. And I'll help you dig out your own answers. And you're not trying to answer that question. What you're trying to do, or you are, but ultimately what you're trying to do is show your grandchild how to get the answers when you're not there. Because one day you won't be there. And they can't just come to you and say, answer this question for me. It's, how do you get your answers from God? Because the best answers are the ones you get for yourself. And that normally requires work. And what we're finding is, in these later generations is, especially in church even, people are unwilling or somehow not committing to do the work to get the answer. Answers don't come easy. They don't come cheap. They need hard work, and they need patience, and they need application, and they're challenging to get the answers to certain questions. And a lot of the theology I learned was at the end of questions that other people threw at me that I didn't understand. I had people questioning the Trinity. Well, I didn't understand. They made mincemeat of me in the argument. Something about what that phrase means. They really had the better answer in the argument. They were wrong, but I couldn't argue against them. So I went home, I talked to the pastor, I talked to the youth pastor. They said, you need to read this. So I got the books and I read it, and I worked hard at it, and I spent my time finding out why I believed in the Trinity. But the next time somebody asked me, it was my answer. It wasn't even the pastor's answer. I got it for myself, and because I had it for myself, there was a conviction about it, and there was an unshakability about it. And no matter what they said to me, I was not going to change my view, because I got this from God myself. So questions are brilliant. One pastor once said to us, to him that asked no questions, Jesus gave no answers. So you're trying to get questions coming. And if you want the answer from God, you better ask him some questions. And you know, God does not mind questions. What he doesn't like is questioning. And that's the difference. So ask all the questions you want of God, ask all the questions you want of your grandparents, but don't be questioning, don't be sceptical in that sense.
I probably just want to add in 3 quick thoughts on this as we're talking together. And the first one is that often you might remember it as a parent, but I think it's true of grandchildren as definitely, they may ask you a question and it's not necessarily the real question that they want answering. They're sort of putting out a little question to see how you'll respond. Yeah. And there's something below that they're really wanting to ask and they haven't quite dared say it. And so rather than just jump in and sort of tick, I've answered that question, if you're wise, you will respond with other questions and try to see what's perhaps underneath and what they're really wanting answered. You could probably think of an example. But anyway, the other 2 things that I was thinking with this, maybe you're in a situation, you're godly, following Jesus, grandparents, but maybe your children are not. And then you've got grandchildren that you've got input into their life. And so then you've got to be a little bit careful. You don't want to totally cut across what mum and dad are perhaps saying to their children. And so you have to be clear, well, this is what granny thinks, or this is what grandpa thinks, and this is what we think the Bible is teaching us. You don't want to set up a conflict for that child with their parents. And the other thing is something very simple. Let's take it right back sort of down to basics. There are things that your children might teach their children differently. So let's pick something, is there a Father Christmas? Okay, well, we always taught we never wanted our children to, we wanted our children to think Father Christmas comes from a real man, St. Nicholas, who was very generous to the poor and so on, and that's the legend of Father Christmas. But in real life, it's us that buys you the presents. I worked hard. I want you to know I bought you these presents. But maybe your children, your grown-up children, want their children to believe in Father Christmas. You might not agree with that, but you can't, it would be wrong of you to step in against your children's wishes on that sort of issue. So how do you answer this? I think you have to say, well, you need to ask your mummy.
Well, I have to say that particular one didn't go down well. Because we talked about this as parents with our children, and he said something like, we didn't want them to end up comparing, oh, this is just another myth. You've told about Father Christmas, he doesn't exist. You've told about Jesus, well, he's the same as Father Christmas there. We didn't want that association. So I tried to broach this with our young children and say, well, maybe Father Christmas, oh no, Daddy, we know that, but we want to believe in him anyway. So they had it all worked out, what they were going to do, and they just dismissed me as not really understanding where they were at. And they had it all worked out at 5 and 6 years old, so I just let them do it. It was fine.